Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from today. I'm happy to welcome you to our very first Network Cities webinar of the year. A special welcome to anyone who might be joining us for the first time today. So the Network Cities webinars or platform falls under the AfriFood Links project. And this is a space where we bring together cities and as well as partners just to share on some practical experiences and ideas towards building more sustainable and resilient urban food systems. My name is Sinethemba Mthethwa, and once again, I'm very pleased to welcome all you today to form part of a conversation that focuses on food loss and food waste within urban food systems. And today, with a particular focus on approaches to food recovery as well as value retention. Today, we have an example from Refreshi, an app-based example, and we have Jacob today who will share more about that. Last year, we closed off our webinar series with the food session, also focusing on food waste and food loss. And here we explored some of the challenges that some of our cities are facing across the value food chain. So today we continue that conversation as well, just with a bit of a twist. As I mentioned, we're looking at app-based solutions and what this looks like in practice. So as we may all know that food loss and food waste is a complex challenge in Africa, today we want to have a look at where cities are actively innovating, as well as where cities are testing these solutions. Before we begin the session, I'd like to make a note of some few housekeeping rules. Please remember to keep yourself muted throughout the session so that we avoid any background noises. You're also welcome to use the chat function to ask any questions or make any reflections during the session. And feel free also to introduce yourself in the chat, tell us who you are, and tell us where you are joining us from. Later in the session, there will be space for discussion. So if you want to hold on some of the questions for that stage, you're also happy to. With that said, I'd like to welcome you once again to our webinar, and I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Jakudu, who will take us through the session. Thank you, and over to you, Jakudu.
Thanks, Sneh. If you could just give me a moment to share my screen. All right. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. As Sneh has said, I'm Jakudu Guya, and I work at ICLA Africa as a professional officer in the urban systems, largely working on circular economy projects. For today's session, I will be giving a presentation on the City Practitioners Handbook for Circular Food Systems as a way to basically introduce the topic that we are speaking about today. Sneh has given an overview of what we aim to achieve in this session, and I would like to simply contextualize, number one, what circular economy is and how it applies to the circular food systems. This will be a useful grounding, largely for our local government practitioners, that will lead us into the presentation that will be followed by Jakub in a moment. I did want to start this off by pretty much giving a little bit of a contextualization around where our current economic system is and what the challenges we are looking to address are. So currently, we largely work and live in a linear economy where materials are taken from our ecosystems and they are turned into products in the production phase. And eventually, when we don't have much use for them, they end up in, for example, landfill sites at their end of life or are subject to improper disposal practices thereafter. What we also know is that cities consume about 75% of the world's natural resources. They are also responsible for about 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions and actually produce about 50% of global waste. In addition to all of this, we have seen that about 106 billion tons of raw materials are actually extracted annually from our ecosystems. And it's actually expected that this number will continue to rise by to about 60% by 2060 if we carry on with the business as usual approach where we continue to extract materials from the environment. We also know that only about 6.9% of our materials are cycled back into the system, which actually indicates that circularity of our materials is actually shrinking. Furthermore, extraction and processing actually drive about 60% of global heating impacts, which includes land use changes. It includes about 40% of air pollution impact and more than 90% of global water stress and land-related biodiversity loss. All of these in some way, either directly or indirectly, impact our food systems. And what this essentially means is that in many regions, we are struggling to meet food demands for a growing population, and we are also facing external shocks such as resource scarcity, climate change, and various health crises. What we then have are a range of drivers of change. Apologies if I could just admit a few more people that are joining our webinar. Yes, sorry about that. What we also currently know is that the current dominant globalized food systems that we are in trigger for reaching detrimental socioeconomic and environmental effects, where we know that environmental impacts across the food value chain, which includes production, aggregation and processing, market distribution, consumption, as well as resource and waste recovery, are impacted by things such as natural resource degradation, where the dominant production methods that we follow are harming the environment through things such as overuse of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. We're also experiencing pollution, largely in the aggregation and processing stage, where large amounts of pollution are a result of food packaging, and also over 33% of food loss and waste, which result from inadequate cold chains in storage and processing. When it comes to markets and distribution, here's where we are largely seeing a disconnection from customers, where a big result of the supermarketization trends have left urban dwellers disconnected from their food and their producers. And we also know that this disconnection largely affects the urban poor who may spend over 50% of their income on food. When it comes to consumption, we have very unsustainable lifestyle practices where what we've observed is that humans are consuming more processed foods, which are highly resource intensive. And when it comes to wastage of resources, which is at the resource and waste recovery stage, it is estimated that about 17% of food available to consumers goes directly to the bin. And why I highlighted this piece is because this ties quite well into Jakob's presentation, which will demonstrate ways in which we can address some of these challenges, largely ensuring that our food doesn't end up in the bin, whether it's at the individual level by the consumer, or even at the retail level in businesses that provide us with food. And so with all of this, why then are we looking at circularity as a solution to achieving sustainable food systems? Today, our globalized food systems are currently under significant pressure, as I've already alluded to, where we are seeing that there is that these systems drive significant environmental degradation and resource depletion. They reinforce socioeconomic inequalities across value chains, and we are seeing that struggle again to feed a growing population in a sustainable manner. But we're also seeing very high vulnerability to shocks such as climate change, resource scarcity, and pandemics as a good example. But on the other hand, what we do know is that adopting a circular food system has benefits for climate action, for resilience, for biodiversity protection, for inclusion, as well as innovation. And so, in order to give us a little bit of a foundation, we wanted to highlight a definition from the FAO on what we mean by sustainable food systems, because this is what we are looking to encourage and transition to. And these are food systems that deliver food security and nutrition for all in such a way that economic, social, and environmental bases to generate food security and nutrition for future generations are not compromised. But then, what is the circular economy? The circular economy is an approach that encourages us to shift our systems from what you would have seen in my earlier slides regarding a linear system into one where we regenerate our natural systems, where we design out waste and pollution, and where we keep products and materials in use for a longer period. ICLEI, as well as a range of partners, in line with this, developed what is known as the 5Rs framework, or the Circular City Actions Framework, which has been designed as a tool to guide local government practitioners and other stakeholders as well to adopt a circular economy approach. And it includes 5 strategies which can be applied, which include rethinking, regeneration, reuse, reducing, and recovering. And essentially what these mean is when it comes to rethink, we're looking at ways in which we could redesign our systems. When it comes to regeneration, we're largely looking at ways in which we can harmonize with nature. When it comes to reuse, we are looking at ways in which we could keep our materials in use for a much longer period of time. And reducing is about reducing the amount of materials that we are extracting from our ecosystems. And recovery is now where we try and keep materials in the loop for as long as possible. So how do we close the loop? By identifying ways in which materials can be reintroduced to the system instead of getting sent off to landfills or being improperly disposed. And so what this framework looks like when you apply it to the linear economy in order to facilitate the transition is breaking up these 5 strategies into different aspects of our value chains. So in the very early stages where we are taking materials from our ecosystems, we are largely looking at ways in which you can apply rethinking and regenerating practices before we take materials from the environment. And so rethink is about ways in which we can redesign our systems to lay the foundation for circular activities and to enable the transition to a circular economy. Regeneration is about harmonizing with nature in ways that promote infrastructure, production systems, and sourcing practices that allow natural ecosystems to thrive. So how do we ensure that we are not over extracting materials, and we are doing so in ways in which that are sustainable to the spaces that we are in? When it comes to the making of products, we need to ask ourselves, before we make something, how can we reduce or reuse that material? So reducing is about doing better with less by using and supporting infrastructure, processes, and products that are designed to minimize material, water, as well as energy use, and also waste production from the production to the end of use of a product. When it comes to reuse, we ask ourselves how we can use materials for longer and more often by extending or intensifying their use of these existing resources and products, or even spaces and the necessary infrastructure required for those systems. And then when it comes to waste, before we waste something, is there a way in which we can recover this? And what this allows us to do is eliminate waste by maximizing the recovery of resources at the end of the use phase so that they can be reintroduced into the production phase. And so in line with this framework, a handbook was designed, and this is what I want to highlight. I will also just note that Sneh will help us by pasting the link to the handbook in the chat so that you can have access to it. I won't go over the entirety of the handbook for now, but we'll focus largely on the components that highlight examples of circular interventions for implementation or for action. This handbook was designed for local governments and regional governments that are working on a circular transition for their food systems. They help with local action for food systems, which can be initiated in different departments, whether it's environment, health, urban planning, public works, or education. And they help to facilitate interdepartmental collaboration. Therefore, most of the sections in the handbook have been designed in a very presentation friendly format, which makes it very easy to use by different stakeholders. So if you are in local government, it's very practical for how you can adopt this tool. But for other stakeholders, it's also an inspirational tool to help better understand what local governments are looking to do and ways in which your organizations or interventions in businesses can support or leverage the practical support that might be provided by local governments through the adoption of these interventions. So now going straight into the handbook itself, what is this handbook? It is the City Practitioner's Handbook for Circular Food Systems. And this handbook combines learnings from food systems and circular economy frameworks, and it helps to build on existing work and local good practices to offer practical recommendations for designing circular food systems at the local level. And it also then helps to deliver socioeconomic benefits. It also aims to provide city practitioners with tools and examples to help them to turn a concept of circular food systems into a tangible local action. This framework was actually designed in alignment with the FAO framework for the urban food agenda, which calls for more integrated food systems planning and inclusive governance. It also calls for shorter food supply chains, for innovative and sustainable food business models and supply chain optimization for food loss and reduction. This handbook also outlines concrete steps to develop and implement integrated food policies and strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from urban and regional food systems. And so this handbook was basically built in 3 key steps that help to facilitate this transition through circular food systems. And each step in the handbook has examples that local government practitioners can apply. It includes a range of interventions or examples on circular economy interventions, on practical sustainable food systems actions, and it also includes a range of policy instruments that local government practitioners can leverage and apply. I'm now going to just share how the handbook guides users to apply the 5Rs framework to food systems. And so just a reminder, the 5R framework includes 5 strategies that local government practitioners can adopt, which are the rethink, regenerate, reuse, reduce, and recovery principles. And so when it comes to rethink, it provides 3 key actions that can be taken, which include supporting cross-sectoral collaboration and restructuring urban spaces and value chains for sufficiency. It also includes the action which says to support ownership systems and governance models that enable equal distribution of value, and also divesting from incentives, policies and investments and assets that support the linear economy. I will only highlight one of the examples that it expands on in the handbook, which is on this last point around not supporting the linear economy. And so this is an example from Turku in Finland, where the municipality there or the city government has committed to reducing food service related greenhouse gas emissions via circular procurement. And this is a very practical example for local government, for local governments, because this is something that they can directly incorporate within their governance systems. When it comes to the action around regeneration, the 3 actions that are highlighted are around restoring local ecosystems and respecting their carrying capacities. We also have the prioritization of the lowest impact renewable resources and nature-based solutions. And the last one being favoring regenerative urban systems. And for this one, I wanted to highlight just one example from restoring local urban systems, which encourages us to not to restore polluted agricultural land and restore groundwater bodies. Here, an example from China in Shenzhen basically notes that we can learn from them in their intervention, where they took or turned a 105-acre abandoned agricultural experiment station and turned it into a park that incorporates sponge city principles. And one of the things that they did there was set up small swales to catch runoff. Under reuse, the three actions that the handbook outlines are supporting reuse, repair, remanufacturing, and maintenance of existing resources, products, and infrastructure. And this is about promoting repair and maintenance of cold chain assets and food storage infrastructures. It's also about supporting farming on vacant lots of buildings and also other unused infrastructure. And the example here that I liked was this one from Pittsburgh, where through a program called Adopt a Lot, they allowed urban residents or citizens to grow their own food on vacant city land. Other actions that local government practitioners can take include facilitating secondhand markets and sharing and exchange platforms. There's also design and regulation of extended use. So how can we support take-back systems for containers for direct reuse? When it comes to reduce, here we're looking at actions that help to minimize waste across life cycles. And a good example for this is from the York municipality in Canada, where they conducted a food waste audit and a waste reduction pilots with supermarkets and restaurants. And as you'll hear from Jakub, his intervention is one that could have very well integrated into something like this, where the waste audit could have been useful insight into how to design the platform that he established. And so there are ways in which various stakeholders get to learn and leverage from each other. The next action is on optimized infrastructure and production systems to decrease their resource footprint, and lastly, encouraging sustainable consumption practices. When it comes to recovery, which is our last principle or strategy, the key actions here are around designing for separation and recovery. And this is something that is very big in the global south, and particularly in Africa, where our waste management systems are not strong in supporting the separation and recovery of materials at the household level. But we do note that the informal sector is really great at doing that on behalf of various waste producers. There's also the strategy on collecting, labeling, and sorting waste to facilitate recovery. And this is a very key component that helps to ensure that materials retain their value as much as possible for recycling and recovery purposes. The last strategy is on processing waste and ensuring its re-entry into the industry at its highest value. So a good example here is one that is based here on the African continent, in Kilimani in Mozambique, where the city composts waste from urban food markets at the Kilimani Limpa composting facility. And this is key when you consider contexts such as many of our cities, where a large portion of our municipal waste is actually organic waste, with many cities experiencing or reporting numbers of a minimum of even 60% of organic waste flowing through their municipal waste system. So these are various interventions that local government practitioners can be inspired by for taking action. And in relation to this, we thought it would be a really good opportunity to actually learn from a business that is doing just this, which is Refreshi. So we are having a business spotlight, and Jakub Holbach will be taking over from me to basically share his presentation. But before he gets started, I did want to give a little bit of of an introduction on Jakob and who he is. So Jakob is a seasoned leader and strategist who is passionate about delivering value for customers and stakeholders. He also holds a global executive MBA from Instead, which is one of the world's leading business schools. And he also holds a graduate diploma in international business from Copenhagen Business School. But actually, what interested us the most about his background is his passion in making positive impacts by reducing food waste in South Africa and providing more affordable meals. So I'll hand over to you, Jakob, for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Shakuda. Can you see my screen now and hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So thanks to everybody for joining. Once I start talking, I get a little bit passionate, but if you have any questions, just unmute and ask as we go along, right? Cool. Just briefly about myself, originally from Denmark, but I live in South Africa. I lived in Cape Town the last 5 years. My wife is South African and we have 3 kids here. We like the place very much. The past I used to be in business. I worked for Maersk, the big shipping company, where I was handling all the ocean transport in and out of Africa. But a couple of years ago, I thought it's time to do something else and make a bit of a difference. And I teamed up with a couple of guys called Martin and Greg that also have some experience both in South Africa, but also with running a platform for 1,700 restaurants in South Africa. So they know how to build tech and scale and make an impact. So I think you alluded to it a bit earlier, Yakuda, but yeah, for South Africa specifically, I think we have this dilemma that you have 15, 20 million people that live with food insecurity every day. And even a lot more people living on a tight budget, also now with fuel prices going up, as an example. And at the same time, we have 10 million tons of food wasted every year. And a lot of this food has not expired yet. It's perfectly fine to consume. And we don't believe this should go to pigs or black flies or be composted. If it's still fine to eat, then it should go to humans. So there's actually enough food. It's just not being connected. So that's what we've tried to solve. So we created a platform or an app called Refreshi that connects surplus food, basically unsold food, typically at the end of the day. That could be from supermarkets, bakeries, coffee shops, hotels, restaurants, etc., with consumers at a discounted price. Typically, it's half the price, some cases even 1/3 of the price. So the way it works, as a customer, you sit at home in your sofa, you download the app, then you can either look at a map or a list view. You find all the stores that are on the platform, find some of them that's near you, and you find that's interesting. You say that could be a baked goods bag, or it could be a fruit and veg, or dairy, or it could be a buffet, things like that. And you say, okay, I want to buy it. You pay for it, and then you go to the store and collect it, typically the last hour before the store closes. And it's called a surprise bag because you don't know exactly what's in the bag, but you always know the category, whether it's fruit and veg, etc. And you know the price, you know how close it is to you, and you can then see how it's been rated by other customers, so you know it's quality. We are a bit inspired by, some of you might know, Too Good To Go. They saved 135 million meals last year in Europe and the US. And we looked at what they've done, given it a South African twist, and now going full steam ahead. So if you look at what's in it for the consumers, basically they can enjoy good food for less than half the price. Sometimes they have an option to discover some new food options. I don't know with you, but I'm not so sophisticated. So if I go to a supermarket, I buy the same 6 things every single time. But now here you actually get a chance to try something new. You also get, a lot of people get this, unboxing feeling, get very excited about when they unbox to see what they received. And then I think some of us sometimes feel, where's the world heading? Donald Trump cares less about sustainability, and it seems to be less in the agenda compared to a couple of years ago. What can I do myself? Here's actually a tool where you can play an active role in making sure that less food ends up at landfills. What's in it for the stores? So for the stores, for them, it's easy. They can turn some of the surplus food into extra income with minimal effort. So there's no logistics involved. You basically just pack what you have left at your baked goods counter or fruit and veg counter or dairy counter. And then people come and collect it, and you get money for that. It also helps them to keep the counters full and attractive because they know that there's a safety net of people coming and collecting every afternoon. What they like a lot also is people coming into the store, because if you have Shikuda going into a spa, she might also buy some milk or maybe some cornflakes for the kids. So it brings also additional sales at the full price. And then we also show both to the consumers and to the stores. We give them some data on how many meals they saved. What does that mean in terms of CO2 saved, water saved, and land usage saved? So that we put some of these metrics on the table, and you feel you make a difference. So these are some of the partners we are working with in South Africa today. Maybe some of you know Krispy Kreme or Bootlegger Vita. We also have 50-60 spas. We just added King Pie last week. Have a couple of Food Lovers Market on. We have Chateau Couture. We have some hotel chains on. So if you look at hotel chains, you probably know a lot of them will have beautiful morning buffets or afternoon buffets. Always a lot of leftovers. So now you can get a full, let's say, brunch buffet. Maybe it's worth 300 Rand and you pay 79 Rand, and there's probably enough food for 2 or 3 people. So half the stores are big and famous brands, and the other half will probably be more independent stores, a mom and a dad who are running a restaurant, and that's fine, and there's space for both. The way we create some awareness about it is very much on social media. So I think we've been going now, we started on the 10th of March last year, and now we have already across Instagram, TikTok and Facebook, 100,000 followers. And every day we also have organic materials of people uploading, sharing their experiences. Some of the videos get like 1 million views, 3 million views. So there's a lot of excitement and, interest, and people commenting on the posts and sharing them, etc. If you look in South Africa, some weeks we're actually the second most downloaded app on the Apple App Store. So some quite big names, Mr. D, Uber Eats, McDonald's, Spur, KFC. And now suddenly you see a little Refreshi also coming in there, which is quite nice. And it shows that there's interest in what we do. So I think I showed briefly how it works, right? From a consumer perspective, you have the map where you can see what's near you. You have the list view as number 2. It will always show you what's closest to you, because I'm not going to drive 200 kilometers and collect a bag and save 50 Rand, but I might drive 1 kilometer or walk 500 meters. So kind of density is important and something that's close to you. Then if you click on a bag, you can see the different price points. There's an indication of what you could get, where it's based, when you should collect it, and how the feedback is. And then on the far right, you can see your profile of how much money you saved, meals you saved, and the water, CO2, and land usage. So relatively simple. There's of course also a whole backend where the stores can manage their orders and where they see the orders are coming in, who's bought, and when they come and collect. And then they just basically need to pack the bag and have it ready at time of collection. Food safety is of course important. So what goes in the bag, everything is within the sell-by date. So nothing has expired yet, but it might be it expires today or tomorrow. But remember, it's something that the store would have sold at the full price 5 minutes earlier. But because they're about to close, they're motivated to clear the counters. Therefore, they're willing to offer a sharp price. Customers also leave a review, so we can track how the experience was. And every day we keep track of the different stores and how they're coming in. If a store is not doing so well, we'll go and retrain them. And if it continues, we'll take them off the platform so that you can trust that it's quality that you get. The sustainability reporting, just for you to understand a bit more, the way we've calculated is that we say 1 surprise bag equals roughly 1 kilo of food. And there are different studies that have been made in Europe showing that 1 kilo of food, by that not going to waste, we save 2.5 kilos CO2 emissions, 600 liters of water, and 2 square meters of land. And these are European numbers. I talked with CSIR, which is an organization in South Africa, and they say they don't have similar numbers for South Africa, or they haven't done the study, but they actually believe that the numbers could be even higher because 75% of South Africa is powered on coal, and there are quite a long transport distances. But we've gone with a conservative estimate for now. Quite exciting is also that actually last week we signed a partnership agreement with Food Forward SA, which is one of the biggest NGOs in South Africa for food. And in the future, we'll actually on all the surprise bags that we sell, we'll put their branding on so that can create more awareness about what they do, help raise more donations, and they will also help to introduce us to some of their partners. And what they specifically like is that, we can also handle smaller volumes. If you're a big NGO, you might like to go and collect 10 pallets of rice, but collecting 2 or 3 or 4 meals every day from many different stores is difficult to handle. And they also like that we empower customers to actually make a difference and save meals. So we summarize a little bit how we've done in a year's time. So we have 650 stores on the platform now, and basically adding 10, 15 stores every week. We've had 200,000 app downloads, these 100,000 followers on social media, as we talk about. If we look at the rating of the meals, we are on a 4.4 on 1 to 5 scale. So that shows that consumers are happy what they receive. We go and train and onboard the stores. Once we have done that, then they can always reach us on WhatsApp. So we're always available. And we have slightly more than 10 people now on the ground. We have a tech team based in Stellenbosch, a bit outside of Cape Town. And then in all the major cities, we have 1 to 2 people that basically go on site and train the stores and follow up that things are working. And we are backed by a Dine Plan, which I alluded to before, which is Martin and Greg that built that. Apart from having access to all the restaurants in South Africa, they also kind of have been around since 2011. So it's something you can trust. And we're going to be then in the future, of course, and keep our promises. So I think the main thing is that we try to create, I think there's so much talk every day, every week about we have a problem, and we all agree on that. There's enough studies. We all know there's a problem, but what solutions are there that are actually scalable? And we believe we are one of them. And we have the tech now, the marketing, we have the team in place. So now it's about adding more stores and saving more meals. And the ambition for South Africa is to have thousands of stores on and save millions of meals every year. We can then, of course, look to expand into other African markets. And the whole system is set up so that the stores are winning because they get extra income and more foot traffic. Customers are winning because they get access to more affordable meals. And the environment is winning because less food ends up in landfills. So that kind of keeps everybody motivated and on their toes to do their best. So that was just a little bit of what we built so far. You can always feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to discuss a bit more, but you can also just unmute and ask any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Jakob, for the really great presentation. It's been really insightful. And I think when we had the opportunity to hear directly from you about the work that you were doing, we were really inspired. And we had the opportunity to, while on a call with you, actually download the app and go through it and have a better understanding for it. So I do encourage you all to, if you are based here in South Africa, to just quickly grab your phone, go to your app store and download the app and get to experience it for yourself. I'd like to check if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask our speaker. While we wait for some questions, I do have one.
Balance has a question. Balance, Hala.
Please go ahead, Balance.
Yes, thanks, Chukuru, and thanks a lot, Jakob, for the great presentation. I really like the app. Just one question, maybe you already mentioned this, but I'm wondering how many cities in South Africa is this app active in? And also, do you have stats or do you know if it's accessed by mostly young people, which I mean would make sense, but can other people also access it also from, let's say, low income communities as well? And I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, where are you based, Balance?
I'm in Germany, but I'm South African.
Okay, yeah. No, so I think the first question. So we are in Cape Town, but basically all over Western Cape now. We're also in Johannesburg, Pretoria, Durban, Port Elizabeth, East London, George, Mossel Bay. We focused initially on opening up in the bigger cities because you kind of need a bit of density of population, and also that you're close to the stores. And for now, it's quite physical that we go and visit all the stores, try and find the owner, and then pitch the idea to them, and then go and train them afterwards. Once we get bigger, I hope we can move a lot of both the sales and the training online, and that would, open up all of South Africa and also a lot of the smaller towns and cities. And that's definitely the ambition, that the whole map of South Africa, we have stores everywhere. If we look at who are some of the customers, so I think it's quite a broad mix actually. It just requires that you have a phone and that you can do online payments, because we cannot handle cash because that becomes a bit messy. But we have students. I think also half of students in South Africa live on a very tight budget. They maybe make 2,000 Rand a month. They pay half of that back home, and then they sit and study, and they had an apple for lunch. So, students is a big part of the group because they're on a budget and quite tech savvy and willing to try something new. We also see young families that are on a tight budget and want to have more affordable meals. We also see some pensioners actually coming in there. If they're also a bit tight and they know they don't have a lot more income coming in, they're also looking for a good deal. But we see many different ways of using it. We also see, mothers in Cape Town that have maybe a student studying in Pretoria, and instead of transferring some money to them and they don't know what's that being used on, they actually pay for a meal and they have the daughter go and collect it. We also seen some families in Joburg where maybe the parents are living in George and are pensioners, and then they buy some meals for them. We also had a lady who went to buy from a supermarket 5 bags every day. And we thought, okay, you're quite hungry. What's happening? And it's basically, she liked to use it as giving back to the community. So every day she would give 5 meals away. She would give it, either to the housekeeper or the gardener, or maybe the guy on the street, or the parking guard. And it's a nice way of giving something. Here's a meal, and maybe you get a hug and a smile and a high five. And it's quite tangible. Does that answer your question, Balance?
Yeah, it does. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Of course, the lower LSMs are a big focus group for us. I think also, a lot of people who work in the mall will also go and collect from some of these stores. But we're also trying to see how we could get in with more of the grocery stores that are based in some of the townships, because that will mean that people need to travel less. And that's also something we like to work on.
That was a really nice question from Balance. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question for Jakob? While we wait for perhaps another hand, I do have one. Of course, you were inspired by an intervention that you had seen in Europe, and you came and applied it in the South African context. I basically wanted to see whether there's anything that you could share around like your experience of starting up your company in the South African context. Was it something that was easy to do? Was it challenging? And perhaps did you face any blockages that you think could be responded to by government, whether it's at the national level or even at the local level?
No, I think one thing is, I think it was inspiring that we know there's a problem. Then you look for other countries, is there a solution we know is working, and then kind of bringing that together. I think it was good to team up with a couple of local guys, right, who know how things are working. But setting up a company and getting that up and running was quite quick. I think some of the challenge, of course, in the beginning, we had no app, we had no website, we had no social media. We basically just had a presentation and going around trying to get stores to say yes, let's try it. So I was running around in 35 degrees heat in Stellenbosch and knocking on every door. So, but since then, I think it hasn't been, it's been quite straightforward. Of course, there are challenges every day, but I think that's with the business, right? And we just need to solve them. I think we try to talk with City of Cape Town, or we try to, City of Johannesburg, and see, is there something we can do? We haven't seen too much support, right? They say, yes, it's a problem, but then, is there something you could do? Could you help us to, connect us with some of the places that, have, surplus food, or is there a way we could create more awareness about it together? But I guess some of these municipalities, they also have a lot to look after. First, they need to make sure that there's water, electricity, hospitals are working, schools are working, and so on. And maybe food insecurity, although it's a good thing to talk about, I don't think a lot of them have a dedicated team. But if somebody's here on a call, have some contacts, and believe that there's a way we can work together, I would love to talk more. But the initial talks we've had has been, haven't shown a lot of results. So that's why we just steam ahead directly and try and approach the partners directly.
That's definitely a very interesting point that you raise, and I think it's one that's been coming out a lot, particularly under the AfriFood Links project. And I think those on the call that are working directly on the project will remember some of these conversations and might actually be directly involved in these, which are local governments across the continent and even in many parts of the world do not have dedicated food systems units to address challenges at the local government level. And I think your point there just highlights that there is an opportunity to address some of these barriers. And we might not necessarily get to a resolution in this call, but I guess this is also, again, affirming the importance of having such conversations and working towards addressing some of these issues and challenges. We have a question here.
I feel I've joined quite a lot of sustainability conferences, and just to be very frank, it's the same talk every time. Everybody talks about the problem. Now it's time for cooperation, work together, all that stuff. Everybody knows the stats, but the actual solutions, I feel, is being discussed a lot less, right?
Yeah. Without putting anyone on the spot in the call, I do know that something that has been directly worked on in one of the work packages of AfriFood Links has been directly that interface between local government and practitioners. And so hopefully in all the research in all the writing that's being done on the project, some of the results and the practical interventions that have come through will be shared as well. Michaela Dale's question, which is, are there ever instances where establishments don't want to be onboarded, and if so, what are their reasons?
Yeah. No, sometimes you meet stores, right, that there can be different reasons for not wanting to join. First, maybe they don't fully understand the concept. That could be one reason, even though we try and explain it. It's something new. And if you meet a spa owner who is 70 years old, has been running his shop the same way the last 30 years. He trusts nobody in his team, and he doesn't want to try anything new. Otherwise, it could be that the store believes they don't have the time to do it, even though it's only 5 minutes. Some stores also will say they have no waste. But, I would say most stores that sell food would always have a little bit of leftover every day. And sometimes we talk with bigger chains, and you talk with the head of operations there. He said, no, we have no waste. And then when you actually go to the stores and you talk with the guys who are managing it, they say we have everyday leftovers. And then either we try and pitch it to the head office. If they say no, we try a few franchisees. And then once you start getting 10 franchisees on, you actually can show the numbers. Then you can go back to the head office and say, well, we just tested it with 10 of your stores. They're all very happy. Should we try and roll it out across all your stores?
Nice. Before we come to you, Paul, I'd like you to keep your hand up. I just have a follow-up question on this very point that Michaela had noted. Do you find that you do quite a lot of work going back to businesses and doing with, I don't know if you would call them quality checks, or actually doing that research and being on the ground to get insights around like what's happening? Or do you find that organically over time, the credibility of your business has then influenced others to express interest in participating or gaining access to the platform as distributors of food that they
No,
perhaps
so
would like
of course
to put
the setting is easier now as we have some results we can show and some other brands, and that gives trust. But still, it's yeah, and every week we also have stores that sign up with us, which is always great. But there's still quite a lot of knocking on doors and explaining how it works. And we see you can send emails, you can give phone calls, but who is actually the owner and decision maker? And often, if you run a big store and you have 100 employees, you don't have much time for doing things like this. So it's quite face to face and showing up that gives us the wins at the moment.
Yeah, quite a lot of work goes into interventions that are direct, that have a higher impact on society than those that aim to drive profits. And I think that's coming out strongly there. Paul, please come through.
Thank you. Thank you, Jakub, for that interesting presentation. Mine is not a question, but just a comment based on an experience of one of the projects that we are working for under Afri Food Links. Yeah, we have been piloting some food rescue with the food bank in Kenya. Of course, the model is a little different because that involves people donating the food so that is rescued and then donated to some unfortunate people in the society who do not have food. So we realized that it works well for fresh produce and maybe dry goods, the uncooked foods. But for cooked foods, there is always this fear of liability that in case something happens, who will take liability? So maybe I just wanted to look at that, and if you can confirm whether you do cooked foods and how that works. In your case. Thank you.
Yeah. No, so I think what we started with is kind of the low risk categories, which would be baked goods or fruit and veg. If you get a banana that's a little bit, squashy, it's not going to make you sick. We haven't touched too much on meat yet, unless it's frozen meat. But of course, if you get a piece of meat, there can be more consequences if you get sick there. We also do deli items, and some stores are happy to do that. And that can be from a buffet, for example, which seems to work well. And remember, it doesn't leave the cold chain because people come and collect it from the store. So it's something that's in the counter at the store that the store would have sold at full price 5 minutes earlier. And it stays in the counter. There's no changes in temperature. So that also works quite nicely. And then we have our own food safety guidelines. And then, of course, if we work with bigger chains like Spar, we also adjust to based on what they believe works for them. But we start with the low risk items first. And then I think for meat and so on, we go for if it's frozen. And it doesn't kind of change in the temperature. Does that make sense, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
That's great. So I think at this point, Paul's highlight is actually nice for the transition into the next piece. We did think we would spend quite a lot of time doing this piece, but because we've had really good conversation, I didn't want to perhaps stop that, but I still think it is worthwhile sharing. We thought a useful outcome of this webinar would be starting to collate other interventions, businesses, examples, initiatives across the globe or wherever you're located that are similar to what Jakub is doing, or perhaps that you might be working on yourselves, because I do see from a couple of introductions in the chat, some of you are founders of organizations or businesses and are doing interesting work, just from seeing some familiar faces in the room as well. What we have is a mural board where we have started putting down some of the interventions that we're familiar with that are circular interventions across Africa, and we've also started plotting a few that are based in Asia and a couple that are in Europe. And of course, there's many more than just these that we have on the map. So I would encourage you to open the link that has been shared. And I will just quickly now share my screen as well, just so that you can see what the map looks like. If you could just give me a second to switch my screens. There we go. I hope you can see my screen right now. If you jump onto this mural board, we basically have a map of the world there, and we have, as I've said, started showing some interventions from across the continent, and we do have a couple of blank sticky notes there. So Mural is quite an easy app to use. If you jump on it, you are able to toggle around the map using your mouse. You can double tap on the screen to move the map around. You can zoom in and out by clicking on the zoom buttons, or however you typically zoom in and out of your screen on your laptop. You should be able to do so. We would like to encourage you to jump onto the map, explore some of the interventions that we've already listed out that we're familiar with, but also start plotting out a few that you are familiar with. These have not been geolocated, but have been placed in the general region of where we are familiar with them. So a lot of these are South African and East African examples. And as you see, we have quite a huge gap for the rest of Africa. So we would like to know what else is being done in other parts of the continent. In Asia, we have a couple of examples that are from South Asia, but like you can see, the map is quite blank from other regions. So please feel free to jump on and share some of the examples of work that you are either familiar with in your region or that you're working on. We're hoping that this map will remain accessible to all of you from the webinar. And if at any point you're looking for either inspiration or interventions that you would like to draw insight from or learn more from, you can use this as a tool or resource for doing so. You are able to link any of the interventions that you write up. So if you know that there's an intervention, but you do not know whether they have a website or an Instagram page or a LinkedIn page where people can learn from it, you can just put down their name, like we've shown here with Inspecti Pro, with Lima Africa, with Replate Africa. And if you have a link to the business, what you can do is click on the mural board, type in the name of the business. Once it is highlighted, you can click on this button here, which comes at the top of your screen once you are inside a box and typing, and you can say create link. As long as the text is highlighted, it will allow you to insert the link to the website, so that whenever anyone comes onto the mural board, they're able to click on the link and it will take them to the website where they can learn about the business. Maybe just to highlight a couple of examples that we've incorporated into the map thus far. We have Chanzi, which is based in Tanzania, and they are a black soldier fly farming business. We also have Meant to Be, which is a business that was supported by a incubation program run by Eclay Africa, and they are based in Johannesburg in South Africa, and they practice sustainable bee farming. We also have another organization or company called Tamu by Jane, and this is run by a lady called Jane Shruti, and she essentially runs a business where she aims to support indigenous food systems in African cities, and she actually has a cookbook, which is a really interesting one for African cities and helps us to learn ways in which we can preserve the food that we love and have continued to eat. A very interesting one that perhaps might not sit at the end of the value chain, but at the very beginning is a company called Bayom, where they basically are producing biofilm, which supports sustainable food production across the continent. So please feel free to jump onto the mural board and incorporate a range of businesses that you might be familiar with. We would love to learn about a whole range of interventions that are taking place across the continent. But this brings us to the end of our session, and I would just like to say thank you to everyone that has joined us for today's session. Jakob unfortunately does have to run, but he has put down his details in the chat for you to contact him if you would like to learn more about Refreshi. And for those based in South Africa, if you are running a business and would like to see how your business can be incorporated into the platform, please feel free to reach out to Jakob. I'm also going to hand over to Sine in case there are some last words that you would like to share before we close off the webinar.
Thank you so much, Jakudu, and I'm going to say thank you to Jakob as well in his absence. I think, yeah, we're minutes over time. Thank you so much to everyone who has still managed to hold on. Just one notice is that we will be having, I think beginning of the session, I did mention that this is our first Network Cities series webinar this year. We will be having another one in about 3 weeks' time, and that one is going to focus on school feeding, but we will share details in the next week or so. We really, really hope that this was a useful session for you. I know personally I really gained a lot of insights. We hope that you'll be able to join us for many more to come. Thank you so much and have a good rest of the day.